Institute. Yes, and that houses accredited academic programs, research centers, and international cooperation initiatives, focusing on a range of environmental concerns and challenges. Our work advances environmental cooperation in the face of political conflict. Our student body is composed of Jordanians, Jewish Israelis, Palestinians, and participants from around the world, and more and more from the Middle East and North African region. And the Institute offers students an exceptional opportunity to learn from leading professionals like Dr. Brenner, while forming friendships and developing skills that enable them to lead the region and the world in solving today's most pressing environmental challenges. At the Institute, the idea that nature knows no borders is not just a belief. It is a fact, a curriculum, and a way of life. We very much promote students learning from each other and learning how to live with each other. Today, we are here to explore negotiations for peace in the environment from Oslo and beyond for someone who really has the experience to share that with us. I'm pleased to introduce Eliza Mayo and Dr. Shmuel Brenner. Eliza is Deputy Director of the Arava Institute, has a background in environmental economics and kibbutz community leadership. And we all bow down to her. She's very, very useful. Dr. Shmuel Brenner, a longtime Arava Institute research and faculty member, was one of the founders and former Senior Deputy Director of Israel's Foreign Ministry of Environment. As part of this position, he served as the head of the Israeli environmental delegation in the bilateral Israeli-Palestinian peace negotiations between 1995 and 2000. And with that, I hand it over to Eliza, and here we go. We do ask that you put questions in the chat or wait till question and answer period, but we are interested in your questions as well as our own. Thank you.
Thank you, Miriam. It's a real privilege for me to be sitting here with you all and with Dr. Brenner, who we've known each other for a long time, and only recently did I really start to fully hear some of his marvelous stories and insights from his period of being at the Oslo Accord negotiations. But I want to start with, Shmuel, if you can tell us a little bit about your experience and your time working at the Institute, some highlights, and I'm not going to give your full CV here, so I think I'll leave you to talk about whatever you want to highlight from your time with us and through to now.
Okay, hello everybody. Thank you, Miriam, and Eliza. I'm very happy to be here this day, evening or morning to you. It's kind of very interesting to have this talk at special difficult times in Israel. And now, 30 years beyond Oslo, it's very important to analyze the situation. But a few words about my connection and my role in the Institute. It started about 20 years ago, and I think now I'm one of the veterans in the Institute. Actually, at that time, I was a faculty member of Tel Aviv University, and I had a sabbatical. I intended to go to the United States or to Europe. But at that time, I also had the role of the director of the National Institute for Occupational and Environmental Health. And therefore, I had to stay in Israel. And Alon Tal came to me and invited me to join this special and unique opportunity at the Arava Institute. And after so many years, I can tell you that I don't know if it's my second or my third career, but I'm very happy and I'm very proud to take part in the activities of the Institute. Over this time, I covered many tasks. The first, I'd like to say that I completely identify with the vision of the Institute. And after working with 10 ministers in the government office, at the end, I found a way to implement at least some of the inspirations that we had during the time the government work. I taught at the industry different subjects. I participated in several projects, and we don't have the time today, but just like to mention two major projects that we did together with FAI and also with the United States Aid Department and the America institutions. One of them, a major project to identify particulate matters, a small particulate matter, it's called PM2.5 in the Middle East. It was a project of $1 million project in Israel, Palestine, and Jordan. And I think this demonstrated the ability, despite the difficult situation, to work together and to get very good results, resulting the scientific options or scientific situation in the area in order to enable cooperation and at least the trust between all the participants in order to be able to overcome the difficulties in cooperation and work together. Another project, another major project was a biogas project in which we provided different biogas units to generate energy from waste to many off-grid communities, communities living without good water treatment and without electricity availability and without a proper way to collect the waste, especially with the Bedouin communities. We had also gender problems to assist the women there. It was very, very interesting. And I think at the end of the day, we demonstrated the ability to work together as part of the vision of the Institute. Today, currently, I'm in charge of, in a different unit, working together with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And we have a special unit where trainees from many developing countries are coming to the Institute to study environmental issues, wastewater issues, air quality, hazardous materials, everything connected to the environment and also environmental health. And I'm very proud to tell you that beyond the corona and despite the governmental difficult situation at the moment, next month we are opening the new course in that respect. And I think that covers everything which is going on there at my respect. And I would also like to mention the friendship and the cooperation that I always had with the team of the Arava Institute. And I'm very glad for that possibility.
We've been, over the years, very glad for that possibility too. And I want to actually bring us back to more history from before your time at the Arava Institute, essentially, when you were at the Ministry of Environment. But before we get into the more nitty-gritty, I don't want to assume that everybody has the same knowledge base. So if you don't mind, Shmuel, in a few sentences to talk about what were the Oslo Accords, what was the historical background, what was happening then overall, and then we'll narrow down into what your role was there and how it. Yep.
Okay. So,
thank you.
So what I have to do is I have to go about 10 years earlier and tell you that before the Oslo process, very in few words, the situation was that after the Six-Day War in 1967, 8 Arab countries convened in Khartoum. And they followed that convention after the war, and also, you know, the late Egyptian President Nasser was there, and then concluded that what was taken by force can only be taken back by force. That meant no communication, no negotiations, no peace talks with Israel. And that was a very grim situation because even if there was a tendency or some efforts to get something done on the ground, it was not possible. Then came the Yom Kippur War. And after the Yom Kippur War, there was a slight change because of what happened with Egypt. And that actually, the peace with Egypt opened the road to some kind of the beginning of negotiations. But on the other hand, it was very difficult with the Palestinians, all the activities of the Intifada and the extremes on both sides actually prevented some kind of a peace process. And the second stage was the Madrid Convention. The Madrid Convention, I believe it was in 1995, was actually a process started by both the United States and Russia. And because it was not possible to have a Palestinian delegation actively operating in that arena, Jordanians actually covered for the Palestinians. And the result of this conference in Madrid was the establishment of two tracks. One track was the multilateral track, and the second track was the bilateral track. Now, the multilateral track, when I come to my situation, the general director of the ministry very much like the multilateral track because he got to travel to Japan, he got to travel to Bahrain, to talk about, the saving of the world, the climate change, the acid rain, the ozone layer, all these major problems at that time. But it had very little to do with the situation on the ground. On the other hand, the situation on the bilateral talks was very much limited, and that was because there was no recognition between Israel and the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, which represented the Palestinians. Then in 1993, negotiations started by Peres and some of his officials, and it started in England, later in Oslo, and that was the start of the Oslo Accord. And what happened in 1993, that there was initial agreement, which was defined as the Gaza and Jericho Agreement. And this with very limited autonomy for the Palestinians, but also the possibility for Arafat and his team to come to the area from Tunisia, and at least the start of a process which is later was called Oslo II, and this is the part where I taken place. And now, Eliza, if you want to, I continue, or if you have something.
I was going to ask you to speak about what your role and experience was in the negotiations.
Okay. Yeah. So now I come to my role, and that was in 1995. Sarah said not to bring up names, but at least few names I can still bring up. At that time, I was in 1995, I was the Senior Deputy Director General of the Ministry for the Environmental Protection. And one day in the spring, the Minister Sarid called me, and he said to me, Shmuel, we are starting now a meaningful peace process. The General Director is dealing with the other track, with the multinational track. I want you to lead the Israeli team on the environment. At that time, we didn't know if the environment will be together with water or there will be two separate teams for water and for the environment. But he said to me, look, you know English, you are a professional, you are not a politician. I want you to lead the Israeli team, and you have 3 days to prepare for the cabinet meeting with Prime Minister Rabin in order to start the negotiations. You'll have to go to Cairo and start with the negotiations. So I asked him, can you tell me something about the agenda? What are the goals? He said, no, this is for you. I count on you. Go ahead and let's go. So what I did, at that time, the talks were headed by the COGAT, by the coordinator for the government in the territories. And I went to their office and I prepared some slides concerning the way we are going to lead the negotiations. And the basis was that, for my opinion, we are going to take on the same level, face to face. We are not going to say that we know everything, that we demand everything, that we'll try to make it as partners, as not as enemies. I came to the cabinet meeting, I showed the slides, I still have them, I always show them in my lectures in the Arava Institute, and I brought up these few slides. I got the approval from Rabin, who told me, look, we are going to negotiate a real peace. It's not that we take Shechem, Nablus as an example. If we are leaving, we are leaving. It's not that we are leaving from the door and come back through the window. And after we separate, I'm not concerned what will happen in the Palestinian territory regarding environmental issues, but the effects on Israel, the effects on the settlers, the effects on the army, but what they do in their own territory, it's not of my concern, and go ahead. So he gave me two aides. Sometimes we also got a lawyer. This is, maybe I'll talk about it later about the lawyer, but he gave me two aides and he sent me to Cairo. Now, when we went to Cairo, and I tried to make it short, when we went to Cairo, we started on the negotiations. The Palestinians that came to the talk, they didn't know about the environment. I found out that the word bia for the environment, they used it for the first time. Nevertheless, we decided that the water and the environment issues will be separated, and there will be two separate subcommittees, one for water and one for the environment. And I was the leader from the Israeli side regarding the subcommittee for the environment. Actually, altogether, there were 12 subcommittees, subcommittee on border, subcommittee on electricity, on borders, on custom, postage, everything together. As I said, the COGAT was the responsibility for the overall guidance of the process, and we started the negotiations. We were moving from place to place. One time it was in Cairo, one time it was in Zichron Yaakov in Israel, or sometimes it was in Sdom in Israel, going from place to place, but I think that was the basis for the activities. And next, I will talk about the talks themselves after Eliza will give me her consent.
Thanks, Shmuel. That's super interesting. And as you know, I mean, he and I sat and talked for, I would say, way longer than the scope of this chat, with hearing stories and talking about it in depth. But we will try to keep this moving along. So if you could talk a little bit about your actual experience in negotiations and what some of the topics that came up. I want to mention here, and maybe you're planning to say it, so I'm sorry if I'm stealing in advance, but Dr. Hamedi, who was the Palestinian negotiator in environmental issues, later became our partner in the biogas project that Dr. Brenner mentioned. So it's just a little nice footnote to the whole thing. But maybe you could talk a little bit about your experience in those negotiations and what topics came up, and from there maybe just start with a little bit more about the environmental topics briefly, if you may.
Well,
thanks.
So it is not easy to speak about the talks in few words, but I can say that many factors actually influence the outcome of negotiations. And since at the beginning, I didn't have any experience in negotiations, I had to decide on my personal know-how and background. And I prepared an agreement, an agenda for the agreement the way I thought it should be. Because I knew that if the Palestinians don't have a document from their own, when I put something on the table, not that they will agree, they will disagree, they will fight, it will be very, very difficult. but I believe that the final document will be based on my document. And I think one thing that I learned, I think it's my nature, but is to carry the discussions in good nature, face to face, in such a way that I can see in the other side, even sometimes they are very fierce enemies, see them as friends or friends in the future. And this is why Eliza mentioned that the major partner from the Palestinian side later was chosen by me to be a partner in one of the major Arava Institute projects. So until today, we have good connections with the people from the other side. This is not to say that everything was easy. On the contrary, it was very, very difficult because, you know, the environment is something which is very, very complicated. It has many, many factors. We have to talk about air quality, water quality, hazardous materials, radiation, everything, and to try and see holistic results when at the other side there are few people, there is very limited know-how, they don't have budget, they don't have major possibilities, and above all, there are core issues of the dispute. Maybe later we can discuss it. The core issues of the dispute are like border security, Jerusalem, refugees, maybe water also. And you may understand that the wish of the Palestinians regarding the environmental issues is to first to address the core issues of the situation and not what at the beginning they thought maybe minor issues, what will be the air quality in a certain area. But I think we covered everything in the discussions. And you know, I've learned step by step how to generate a joint document, because you know, you work in such a process that sometimes you have to separate. You might have internal discussions. Sometimes you do it in the same room. Sometimes you do it in different rooms. Sometimes it takes days until they return with answers. And you know, we often were locked in a hotel in Cairo, and we couldn't get out. So sometimes I had to use the waste exit downstairs to go out and take a taxi to go to see the pyramids. But usually we learned how to conduct the discussions in such a way that it will bring fruitful results. And as a matter of fact, every day of the discussions in the evening, all the subcommittees on the Israeli side met together in order to make a common denominator between the aspects, different aspects that were on the table. I can tell you that finally, we did have an agreement. And this agreement is called Article 12, the agreement on the environment. And any of you are interested, you can look it up and read Article 12 on the environment. There was also Article 40 on water. And since 1995, since there are no amendments to such an agreement, those agreements still exist. And I think that I'm not going to go into all the paragraphs of the agreement, but we did cover one by one each of the subjects that I referred to before. And at the end of the day, both sides signed the agreement. But I want to bring here a question that maybe you can respond and talk about it. It's very difficult when the aim or the wish is to get black and white agreement that everything will be clear. Because if it's very good, if everything is clear and you know exactly, for example, if you deal with water, what will be the standards, how much water will be transported from one side to the other, at what time, what are the programs for the future, and on and on and on. But if you want to get a black and white agreement, you may not get it. So sometimes you say certain questions I will leave for the next generations, and I will put the agreement in kind of gray. Each side will understand the wording according to their wishes. So there is a positive side to that kind of an agreement, but later on, when you come to implement it, it's very, very difficult. So I come back to the agreement. I say the agreement is a good agreement, but since it has also many gray aspects, it was very difficult to implement. One of the paragraphs agreed on the establishment of a joint experts committee on both sides, and is Dr. Ahmedi, who was the head of the from the Palestinian side. We did operate this kind of joint group of experts until the year of 2000, and we did have some successes, but because
I'm gonna let.
Miriam, I want to ask Shmuel a question on this point, actually, if I may. Sorry, we just cut you off in the mid of your sentence, but I think your point here is a very important one, because our next questions are actually about what would you keep or change from how the negotiations were in Oslo, and I'll quote Dennis Ross, who said that Oslo's fail was not not in the negotiations themselves, but in the follow-up, perhaps. So I wonder if you could maybe, we want to leave time for people to have questions as well from the participants. So I want to have my final formal question to be sort of a combination of some of the questions we talked about earlier between us, and sort of ask you, what would you keep or change from how things were done in Oslo, and looking to the future, what would your aspirations be based on that, I guess? That's
okay,
right. Just briefly, yeah.
No, yeah. I just want to conclude what I started to say.
Yeah.
That what I learned is that like the ideas, the big things, you can maybe finalize it with great solutions. That's something that will happen in the future. We are not sure about it. But if you deal with specific issues, practical issues, there you have to reach the black and white. And I think this is what we missed when we did the negotiations 20 years ago. Okay?
That's an interesting insight. So if you were to change something onward, or suggest some prescription for the future about environmental peace building between the Palestinians and Israelis, what would that be based on your experiences?
Okay, there are several things. First of all, I think that the subjects for negotiations, the nature of the negotiations, even the team, I think we had good teams. I mentioned sometimes the lawyers don't help because they put many prohibitions. But this is something which is should be discussed to lie in different condition. But it is very important to decide about the targets, what are the goals, what we want to attain at the end. And then we have to I think something which is very, very important is to have international participation in the negotiations. Like in the Oslo peace talks, the Americans were involved, but they were involved in such a way that they always rushed the teams to conclude, to come to an agreement. If you read the Oslo Accord and also the article on the environment, you will see that not all the points at the end were covered in a practical way. And this is because one day in Eilat, when we had the discussion in Eilat, we were called by the heads of the two teams, and they said, look, we want to sign the agreement. Whatever you have done is excellent. Sign it, and 2 weeks from now, you will meet in Jericho, and there you can bring more teams, more experts to fill all the details. And this meeting after 2 weeks and after a month never happened. We did have, these teams to fulfill what was already done, but we could not. It was rushing, and we could not fulfill everything. But I think that in order to reach a good agreement, especially in the situation today, the Israelis and the Palestinians cannot reach an agreement if they do it independently. If there is another party with us on the table to discuss sometimes what is fair, what is not, what is practical, what is not, I think it will be very helpful. And in my activities after the agreement, we did have good participations with another parties, for example, the World Bank, the American Embassy, but that was not in the framework of negotiations. So this is something which I think is very necessary. The other point, which is also linked to the other part of the questions, is how to address the core issues. Because, as I mentioned before, the aim of the Palestinians is, first of all, to cover the core issues of the dispute. And I want to remind you that under the Oslo Agreement, the West Bank is defined as area under dispute. It's not conquered area. This is the way both sides signed. So I think we have to look at it in an open way about the future and the different core issues. And if we can agree on some kind of relationship, and what I stress, decoupling of the environmental issues from the core issues, and agree from both sides how to do it, then we can maybe prepare better agreement. And according to the process, I think I told Eliza some time about the work we did with the World Bank and the Palestinians. From the professional side, with the professional people, lots of things could be agreed, and the environment cannot wait. We cannot say until there will be a solution on the refugees, then we will deal with the environment, then we will deal with the water. So I think this lesson should be taken from the process that was done 20 years ago. And I also want to mention that usually when people come, even at the Arava Institute, and they discuss these issues, everybody who comes to this very attractive issue of the peace process, he comes with his ideas and he wants to start from the beginning. I think there is no process where the previous activities is really studied. And because of that, there are many, many obstacles, because some of the issues can be resolved by studying the experience from the past.
Thank you, Shmuel. Thank you really very much. And every time we talk about this, I learn new tidbits and insights. So I'm really glad for it. Some questions from the chat. I'll save you having to read through the chat. I want to start with the question of, do you think that the EU or the Saudis and Emirates being involved would be helpful external involvement in negotiations at this stage of the game or at a future stage of the game?
Say it again, please. What is the question?
One of the questions is that you were talking about having external parties, international involvement in negotiations. Yes. And so Miriam asks if you think that the EU and or Saudi Arabia and the Emirates would be good partners for that.
I think yes. I think they may be good partners, because I don't need them to be objective. I need them to be present. because if they're present, they can hear both sides. And once you hear both sides, then it gives you the ability to clarify the issues, to take out sometimes the hostilities, put them aside, and to address the issues in a professional and practical matter. And you know, in many subjects, even economic issues, there is a good cooperation between Palestinians and Israelis. If there is something that people can make money, then they cooperate. And I think regarding like waste treatment, regarding wastewater treatment, there is an ability to construct landfills and wastewater treatment plants that will serve both communities, and both communities will be served and customers. So it is not possible to do it right now because of the hostility between the two sides. But if an external body will be involved in the construction of these projects, especially the economic administration, and looking at the possibility for profits, I think there are good chances to implement this kind of projects.
So I'm sorry, folks. I'm picking and choosing a bit from the chat, and I'm picking and choosing from the chat. So Bob Schloss is asking about negotiating allocation processes, permits, fees. I would even say land allocation. And so, do we know of other places in the world where cross-border allocation processes exist and work? Or is that something we have to sort of invent into our reality?
I think that at the moment, this is not happening. And this is not happening because, you know, the West Bank is divided into 3 areas, A, B, and C. And I think unless there is a government decision to transfer an area from one side to the other, and it will be one way from the Israelis to the Palestinians, then it is not occurring. And this is exactly what I mean when I said about international cooperation, because we have to put aside the issue of sovereignty. Let's say we want to conduct or to establish a wastewater treatment plant. We don't have to decide right now if it will be years from now, it will be Palestinian area or Israeli area. We have to build the wastewater treatment plant on the area, and we have to manage it with international supervision and administration. And if years from now the sovereignty will change, that's okay. But the customers will be served in the area at any time according to the existing situation.
Okay, thank you. There's so many questions. We could probably be here for like 2 hours, but we're not going to be, don't worry. So I'm just trying to see what of these I want to at least pull in one more. I think that
a big question, Eliza, is around water.
Yeah, I'm going to go back up to those. I have to just scroll up, sorry, in the chat. So there's different variations of this question, but about the how much can we, if water is a basic right, how do we negotiate that with people when we're sharing the same water? I'm saying a version of what the person wrote, not what they wrote. And specifically, someone asked about the water in the aquifers of Jerusalem, in the mountain aquifer regions. And if we in Israel use more and more desalinated seawater, would that help the peace process by freeing up water for Palestine?
Okay,
so there's sort of a rights-based question and a practical kind of question that are both about the water.
This is a very good question. Very good question, because if you allow me to elaborate a little bit, I would like to explain. You see, Israel made agreement with the Palestinians on water. If you read Article 40, you have all the different items regarding the agreement on water. And Israel, if you ask the Israeli government, even today is fulfilling the agreement. The Palestinians from their side, they come and they say that the situation now is not the same as it was 20 years ago. The population is changing, the quantities are changing, the agreement is not fair, and they want to change the agreement. Okay, the Israeli comes to the Palestinians and they say, you want to change the agreement? Let's sit down and talk, and talk also about the water for the settlements and everything. And so the Palestinians say, no, we are not going to cooperate with the settlements, and we are not willing to talk about the water for the settlements, but we want to talk about the refugees. So the Israelis say, if you want to connect the water with the refugees, we don't want to discuss the water. And what happens that there is a stalemate. There are no talks on the water. So this is why I said we have maybe to look at it even from humanitarian aspects, on humanitarian basis. We have to decide, to agree that we can discuss the water independently. Nobody is going to give his aspirations, to give up his aspirations. But we are, if it is possible, to talk about water. And what is good here, that contrary to the situation 20 years ago, now we have a solution for the water. The desalination, the major desalination in Israel is such that there are lots of quantities of fresh water developed in the area, and it is not so much dependent on the mountain aquifer. But the thing is that if we talk now about the water, we should leave out the issue of sovereignty, because if there is a demand to talk about the sovereignty over the mountain aquifer, there are no negotiations, especially with the present government of Israel, the terrible government of Israel. But this is the situation. And I think from professional side, the way to do it, and I think the Arava Institute can play a major role, at least in that demand, to put it on the table, to fight for it, because we do have influence. The Arava Institute does have good influence in the United States and in other agencies, and it has the good team to do it. And I think this is an example where we can really even put donations, put money in developing such a process, because this will be a major game changer. And if you allow me to say, when we provide a certain Bedouin village with a small wastewater treatment plant or a small biogas system, it's excellent, but the impact is very, very limited. On the other hand, we cannot change and provide electricity because of all the West Bank. The Arava Institute is not able to do it. But so we have to find something in the middle, something which will be big enough to have an impact and not small enough to be nice, but actually with no major results. And I recommend to evaluate this kind of activities based on my previous experience.
Yeah. Well, wow, Shmuel, I really want to thank you. And just a few words of closing. I want to thank you, for negotiating environmental agreements at the Oslo Accords, for one. I was a kid then, but I think that that was valuable. But I also want to thank you for this talk. Hannah, who works here at the Institute, and I met with Shmuel and started talking about this about a month ago, and they wrote up together a lovely blog post with some additional anecdotes. If you're a history nerd like me and like to hear all the little tidbits of that sort, there's some more in the blog on the website. And we're hoping in the future to do more with this trove of information from Dr. Brenner. I do want to say two things about how I think what I've learned from Shmuel, talking to Shmuel about this, and what I know about the field of environmental peace building and the Institute's work today. And one is, and he didn't mention this because he's being very proper, but he mentioned that when he's talking to us, that some of the, I'll be very vague about who it was. Some of the negotiators on our side were less friendly and positive personalities. I'm being very delicate about it. And some were and coarser, maybe. And some were better at creating and forging relationships with the Palestinians who they were talking to. And as we mentioned earlier on, the relationship between Dr. Brenner and Dr. Hamedi has lasted through to today, including excellent practical projects in the world to help better all of our lives. And so I think one of the things that we also know from our work at the Institute daily is that when we forge personal relationship based on dialogue and respect, we can actually get things done. That's one level. The other thing I wanted to talk about briefly, not in depth at all, but because I know that our time is up, but our track to environmental diplomacy work has really based itself on the kind of approach that Shmuel is talking about, both with on three levels. Also on a theoretical level, which is not what we're talking about right now. Also on a top-down kind of work, where we're having government functionaries agree about the Albira wastewater treatment plant, for example, what to do with its pipeline. And now we're starting to work with farmers trickling down to the actual work in the field. And other projects that have been bottom up, where we've been helping communities and with pilots, and I use that word very intentionally, because Shmuel's right, you can help a small community or a small neighborhood, and that's very nice. But the real trick and the real challenge in the work is to be just talking and partnering and hearing each other, so that the pilots that you choose are appropriate for the communities and then can be expanded on and influence eventually policy as well. So, and that is the work that we're doing now. It's not a magic wand kind of work. It's like the negotiations that Shmuel was talking about. It's the kind of work that you have sometimes make mistakes that you learn from, and have successes that you learn from, and you keep at it and keep communicating so that you can reach actual progress in terms of policy and negotiations and the environment of our region.
And another thing I want to put in there, Eliza, is that in terms of walking the talk, having Dr. Tarek Abu Hamid as our executive director and as a member of the President's Council on the Environment in Israel makes for a possibility of speaking the same language, and that language could be Arabic, and really having a presence in the United Nations, at conferences, at COP, that is very meaningful, not only to Israel, but also to our neighbors, to show that an Israeli-Palestinian is a trusted partner and a trusted representative of Israel. And so maybe, Shmuel, that takes us yet to another level of the way we can sit down at the table and the languages we can speak together, and things that can happen over coffee, like as you demonstrated with your partners who you've kept all these years. This is the most important journey to peace. Thank you all. Thank you, Eliza. Thank you, Shmuel. Thank you, all of you who came and joined us today. This was really fascinating, and to learn both the history and prospects for the future. It is wonderful and scary that we might make some progress. This government, even this government, might make some progress. So enough pushing from the outside, and a lot of it comes with the Saudis and the Americans. We might get somewhere. You never know. Thank you very, very much.
Inshallah, inshallah.
Inshallah, inshallah.
Bye bye. Shalom. See you.
Thank
Bye
you,
bye.
everyone. Good night.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you.